Yes. All right, there we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Jordan. I'm the Managing Director of the IEA, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Charlotte Executives Association. I've seen many of you on the calls, and I'm glad to have such a large audience here with us today. This is wonderful. This is obviously a hot topic that a lot of us know we need some assistance on. So we're glad to have Kathy Clayton, our resident expert, speak to us today. Before we jump into Kathy's presentation, I just want to give a quick plug and shout out. There's a lot of folks from the Las Vegas execs on the call today. Thanks Dale and Ira and Gerald and Amanda so far, I think, for being here today. Las Vegas is where the IEA conference is going to be held coming up in September 24th through 26th. Hopefully you have been seeing the email communications from us on that. Really looking forward to that conference and that event. We have a lot of great speakers lined up. This is not just for executive directors and board members. This is for all members of the International Executives Association. This is a great way for you to network and grow your business and spend some time working on your business at this conference. So hopefully you're seeing the emails. We have early bird pricing and through May the 1st. And for anyone who registers before May 1st, you are entered to win a pair of tickets to see David Copperfield live in Las Vegas sometime during your trip. So please reach out to me if you have any questions about the IEA conference, but we are really excited about that and looking forward to September. Last reminder, these IEA webinars we host every single month. They're generally on Tuesdays, usually about the 3rd Tuesday of the month, but that varies. These are hosted and attended by IEA members. So if you have a great topic that you'd like to share with the IEA, I'll put my contact information in the chat. Certainly shoot me an email and we will get you on our calendar to host an upcoming webinar yourself. Also, these webinars are recorded. They're going to be posted live on our YouTube channel, usually in the next couple of days. So if you missed this or you had to leave during it, or you want to share it with an employee or a coworker or friend or neighbor, you can point them to our YouTube page and watch it there. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Kathy Clayton of the Seattle Executives Association. Kathy started her coaching practice in 1996 and has worked with hundreds of professionals, helping them discover their right way to grow, lead, and thrive. Kathy helps her clients access rapid growth and change with reality-based, solution-focused executive and leadership coaching through the lens of their relationships, especially their relationship with change. None of us like change, isn't that right, Kathy? So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kathy. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate the introduction and welcome everybody. I see some names and faces that I recognize, and I will invite folks to turn on their video. Sometimes it's just really nice to actually see faces. So if you're inclined, please do that. And Lisa is going to be monitoring the chats. So if you've got any questions or comments, please be sure to do that. Before I jump into the presentation, I want to lay out just a couple of goals for this presentation. First off, it's to help you discover what your listening style is, and then help you deepen in that style so that when challenges arise, when you're dealing with something that's really intense, you know how to really tap into the way that you navigate listening most effectively. I am not a PowerPoint person. There's not going to be any screens with words on them, so take notes as you need. And last but not least, please participate. So there'll be times that I will say, hey, does anyone have a comment they want to share? And raise your hand, that kind of thing, or put it into the chat box so that we can hear what other people have to say, because sometimes that's where some of the best learning happens, is from other people. Okay, one of the things also is to discover what gets in your way of listening. Because we all want to be better listeners, but sometimes there's so many things that are distracting us, that are drawing our attention. It can be really hard to focus in a way that allows us to hear what is really happening. And to also discover what's going to support you in listening more effectively. Finally, I think a big part of deep listening is becoming more conscious and intentional, so that you really can take in what someone else is saying so that it lands in a way that you can work with it. That's a theme throughout my coaching, is how do I help my clients become more conscious and intentional? So we're going to weave that into today's webinar. Okay, so what is deep listening? I think deep listening is paying attention and that you are fully present. You're blocking out the distractions. You're able to really focus on who is speaking, who is communicating, and you're able to take that in. And the thing about deep listening, it can be really uncomfortable because someone may be saying something that you don't want to hear, or that they're saying in such a way that it's overwhelming or it's pushing your buttons. And so how do you stay with that when intensity is coming at you? We'll talk about that as well. Now, moving on to listening. Listening is more than just our ears. We listen with all of our senses. And so it's really important to identify what's the way that you'd listen most effectively. I know for me, I listen auditorily predominantly. I've got a very strong oral way of engaging with the world. It's been true for me my whole life. I listen to music. I'm always wanting to hear what the birds are doing and all the things that are happening outside. But because I'm such an oral listener, I also get distracted by all the things that are going on outside. When I first started my coaching practice back in 1996, I didn't have an office. So my office was the local Starbucks with various coffee shops. It took so much energy for me to block out the sound of the table next to me, the sound of the baristas, the coffee machines, the music, everything, just so that I could hear what the person across the table was telling me. I was so grateful when I finally created my home office, because then I could actually listen more effectively. But I'm also a very kinesthetic listener. And that can also be challenging because the moment music comes on, my body wants to move and I'm not always paying attention to what someone is saying. So what I'd like for you to do is to take a moment and just close your eyes and think about, notice, what is your primary way of listening? Is it through your hearing? Is it through the visual? Is it through touch? What sense gets activated most for you? Okay, come on back now. So I would love to hear any comments. Again, type them in or raise your hand, because it's always helpful to hear what other people's primary way of engaging and listening is.
I listen visually.
Okay, good to know. So closing your eyes is always the best thing.
Yeah, no. Thanks, Kathy.
All right. All right, so the hearing center. All right, so we're all going to be listening different. The reason this is important is that you want to know what your style is, but maybe when you're talking with someone else, you want to find out what their style is. And they may not always know, but sometimes they may know. They may be able to communicate that to you. Okay, so now I'm actually going to have you close your eyes again, or just keep your eyes open and focus off in the distance. And I'm going to time this for 30 seconds. And what I want you to do is just notice your environment. Just listen to what you are hearing around you. All right, go, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, come on back. So when I did this, I did this presentation for the Seattle execs back in October, and it was at the Washington Athletic Club. And I had to laugh because when I asked folks to take 30 seconds and just listen, the room was exceptionally quiet in a way that it almost never is. For some reason, the kitchen was choosing to be quiet. But what that did is it allowed folks in the room to notice What was happening with the HVAC system? Were they hearing someone next to them? They were hearing their own heartbeat. So I'm curious, what are some of the things you noticed in just those 30 seconds? Just chime in. Brandon.
I'm in my car, so I just heard my AC blowing, and then like the white noise from the speakers from the silence, you know. So and that was pretty much it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Who else?
Computer fans and neighbors making noise.
Okay. Lots of distractions. All right, what else?
I
Airplane
heard the
flying.
birds chirping.
Say that again,
I heard-
Mari.
I heard the birds chirping and they're cutting the grass.
Okay. Steps my wife was taking, airplanes. So you're hearing all of the environmental noises around you. And it's really important to recognize that that's part of deep listening, is that you're aware of what's going on around you. Chair creaking, walking in the hallway, people talking. Yeah, so there's always tons of stuff taking place. So it's important to notice, oh, this is happening. But since the goal here today is how to have better listening skills, you need to actually have an opportunity to notice what pulls your attention. So there are many different kinds of listening. And of course, today it's deep listening. But the one that I landed on and was reminded of happened just on, maybe it was just yesterday. I was at the gym and one of my fellow gym mates is on the call today. And I was telling him about this. And I had said that it was called deep listening. And then a few minutes later, we went to the second part of the workout and I completely missed what the teacher told us was going to happen in the second part. And I felt a little silly because I had to ask, wait, how are we doing this one? And I thought, okay, there we go. We cannot deep listen all the time, nor do we want to be deep listening all the time. That doesn't make sense. We actually want to be choosing when are we paying attention. And at the gym, quite frankly, it's not that big a deal. I asked the instructor, he gave me the guidance, I knew what I needed to do. But think how often we're just partially listening to the people in our life. When I was talking with a client this morning and she was saying that she and one of her best friends, they do a lot of Marco Polo videos, and it's been really helpful because she knows her friend is a verbal processor. And a lot of times she's just talking about all the different things that are going on in her life. It doesn't require my client to pay a lot of attention until she says something that's really important, and then she tunes back in. So that's a big part of it, is you know when you need to listen, especially if it's your significant other or your kids. Sometimes people just need to talk to hear themselves talk, to be able to process. They don't actually require you to be tuning into every little thing they're saying. But then what about those times when it really is important? When someone really does need you to listen? How are you doing that listening? What are you doing to limit the distractions, to make sure that you can actually focus on that person? Like the coffee shop example I gave earlier, it took a tremendous amount of energy for me to really just put those blinders on, so to speak, so that I could hear what that person was saying. And then once I finally got an office, it was really great because I didn't have to be as distracted by everything around me. Okay, so the next one is, let's talk about some of the various distractions that show up that impede good listening. On this Zoom call right now, some of you who are visual, if there's action going on, that might draw your attention. It may be that in order for you to listen more effectively, you actually have to turn off your video. You actually have to limit what the visual input is. You have to limit what the auditory input is. You have to really understand your own wiring in order to limit all the things that are going to pull your attention. Now, some of the other things that I want to talk about that can get in the way of deep listening is, what's the intention around the conversation? What is your headspace? If you're coming into a conversation, maybe it's with an employee or with a significant other, with a colleague, a client, What's your motivation for the conversation? Why are you wanting to engage in this? Do you need to communicate hard information? Do you know that maybe it's performance review and you've got to say something that's not going to be easy to either say or hear on the other person's part? How do you want to go about doing that? Oftentimes when I'm coaching clients, when they have to have that hard conversation, I encourage them, write it down, take notes. Because when we get triggered, when we're trying to have that important conversation, we can get flooded. And it can be really, really hard to remember all the things that you wanted to say or that you wanted to communicate. Because if you're thinking about, oh, what do I need to say? It can be hard to hear the other person. Now, the next one I want to talk about is also in the intention. And I'm guessing many of you have probably heard this. Are you listening to respond or are you listening to understand? How often in life have you just been thinking, all right, would you stop talking so I can tell you what I think? Because we're not actually hearing, we just want to make our point. That doesn't actually lead to greater connection. And sometimes it can be really hard to stop and say, okay, wait a second, I want to actually hear what the other person has to say. So how many of you, show of hands, are physically engaged and like you have to use your hands when you talk and you're doing that kind of thing? Okay, it's definitely me too. So one of the best ways to support deep listening is to sit on your hands, literally. Put one hand under one leg, put one hand under the other leg. Because when all of a sudden you restrict one of the ways in which you engage with the world, it changes your ability to pay attention. And I have found that when I do that, it all of a sudden connects me with my body, literally, because I've got hands on, but also it brings me back to, why am I paying attention? What is it that I want to get from this communication? All right. I want to confess something in this moment. This is the first webinar I've ever done, so it's an interesting dynamic for me to be able to track all the different boxes and all the different people and all my different notes. So thank you for your patience on all of this. All right, we've got some kind of meeting summary going on here. All right, there we go, the AI. I'm going to guess many of you have a lot of examples of not listening well, of where it's come back to bite you, where maybe it was a spouse or a kid and you get the accusation thrown at you, you're not listening to me, are you? You're not paying attention. Or when someone says, well, what did I just say? Tell me. And they want you to prove that you were listening. And sometimes maybe you can recite back what someone has said, but does that really qualify as listening? Or are you just reciting something? Okay, so I'd like now to hear and take a moment to think about this question. What does deep listening mean to each of you? Thank you, Jan. Yeah, hearing versus listening. And as you come up with what your own definition, your own experience is, okay, no other distractions. Ensuring that, okay, listening for feeling and emotions, not just the words, fully engaged. All right, so we've got some really good presence happening here. And I think so often that's what people want, is they want to feel like I am with you. I'm actually hearing what you have to say. I'm connecting it to something. Value of asking for someone's opinion. All right, we've got some really great comments coming in. Being open-minded to allow yourself to take it in. Okay. All right, so now that you have a sense of what deep listening means to you, what does poor listening And maybe the easiest way to think about this is think about times when you haven't been heard. When it was you really wanted someone to hear what you had to say and it didn't happen. Changing the subject, not responding. Something in my mind, not present. Okay. So it doesn't feel good. Not even asking. Yeah. I think that happens a lot. We just don't even remember that something important happened, so we don't even tune into somebody. I remember years ago, both my parents were self-employed, so I grew up in a business self-employed environment. And they taught us early on how to engage in a professional manner. And one of the things that I learned was, if you want to be considered a great conversationalist, ask a lot of questions. And that's really beneficial for the work I do. I do ask a lot of questions. I hear from people a lot. But what happens when someone asks questions, but they don't actually listen for the response? Yeah, they're just kind of doing it on, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't feel very good. So this is about really choosing, how are you engaging and who do you want to be engaging with? Yeah, you lose trust. It doesn't feel good. And then all of a sudden you don't want to participate with that person. You don't want to have them with you. All right, so now what I want to do, Lisa, how many participants do we have?
There are 39 of us on the call today.
Okay, so I am gonna have us all go into breakout sessions. So it'll be a total of 37. And so Lisa, if you would do breakout groups of 2 and then do one group of 3, that would be great. So that
Oh,
we've
just
got
two people per group?
correct. And then there'll be in, because you and I will not be in a group.
Okay.
So get that set up. And this is going to be,
we're losing people. We're scaring them off.
sorry, folks, didn't mean to scare you away. What I want is an opportunity for each of you to share times when you have listened poorly and times when you have listened well. And so you're going to have 10 minutes for this. And what I'd like is for each person to have 4 minutes to share on both questions. And then you'll have 2 minutes at the end to just talk about what you discovered and what insights you gained. And then have Lisa will bring us all back after a total of 10 minutes.
All right, you ready?
What the assignment is. Times when you have listened poorly and times when you have listened well. All right, Lisa, go ahead and set up the breakout rooms.
Okay, it's got 2 to 3 per room. Everyone's got that? Times when you have listened poorly and times that you have listened well. Open all rooms, off you go.
Thank you, folks.
I think people were not ready to join a group.
Okay, slowly it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening.
There we go. Almost. Okay, well, that is fine. If those folks go in, that'll be great. If not, that's
Okay.
all right. So, not a problem. Okay. All right, so when you set the timer, did you set it to come back after 9 minutes or after 10 minutes?
I didn't. I can close the rooms whenever you want me to. So I just hit the button and it'll close it in 60 seconds.
Okay.
So we're at 25 minutes now after the hour. So.
Okay. Yeah, so at 12:34, let's go ahead and 12:35, that'll be fine.
Okay.
And since we have people still in the room, and Lisa, you're here.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and.
Hey,
Lauren?
my roommate didn't show up. Do you wanna stick me in I didn't take it personally. Do you want to stick me in another room?
Yeah, I have, actually, I'm gonna move you to room 6 because they are on their own too.
Okay.
Let me
Lauren,
find
good to see you.
you. Move you to room 6. Oh, Sandy's back here. Move Sandy to rooms. Oh, it's like a game of whack-a-mole.
Mm-hmm.
Not joined, not joined. Let's see, Sandy, can I move you to room 6? Not letting me do that. Main session. I'm gonna bring Lauren back since her person's not there.
Okay.
All right, Lauren, I brought you back.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sandy doesn't have a microphone, so that's all right. So,
Okay.
so Darren and Ingrid, if you guys want to, if you're present and you want to tune in, we can go ahead and just have the conversation right now. I'd love to hear from folks. What are examples of times you listened poorly?
I feel like I listen poorly a lot. I have 3 kids under all middle school or younger, and so I often feel very distracted and pulled in different directions. And I mean, it's an excuse, I understand, but it just is sort of the nature of my life right now. So between my phone dinging and my email buzzing and the kids needing something, I feel like it's hard for me to listen intently to one child at a time.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
even right now, I'm doing this webinar, and my daughter has a piano lesson in the next room, and she just texted me and said she doesn't have the Zoom link yet. So now I'm texting the piano teacher and asking for the Zoom link, and you're having me do breakout rooms. So this is my life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like I don't listen as well when I'm reacting to something somebody said. Then I feel like, the defenses go up, and then I stop taking in the verbal, the cues, and I just like, my listening goes down and my reaction goes up. So that really cuts it down. So it's especially around like kids or like grandchildren. I remember a time with my granddaughter that she just was like so interesting, little, 8 or 9, and I don't know where she got it, with some sitcom she was watching, but she was acting like she was like 14 years old, and it was driving me crazy. And I think she was just responding because she was defending herself from me, because I was like, you need to like take a time out. And I think she was scared of me. I mean, I was trying, I don't think I was coming on that strong, but I think for her I was, and I should have just like dialed it down and just said, hey, let's just like talk to me about what's going on. Instead, it was just like she was ratcheting up and there was no listening going on. It was just, yeah, it was very interesting. I think about that and it's like, oh, I was not listening very well at all.
Okay, that's a great example. Thank you. And
Yeah.
what you point to is that it's also really painful, especially when it's a little person around you that you love, and it can be really hard. And in the moment, it can be really challenging for how to navigate that
Mhm.
when our
Yeah.
buttons get.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, so
Sandy says, I too feel I often poorly maybe listen, hard to shut off all the internal noise in my head. An example of my poor listening is when watching a movie and they set the scene and I feel lost midway through the movie, not knowing things that were initially stated at the start of the movie. I am so the same way. Like, wait a minute, who's that guy?
Yeah. It's one thing about watching a movie with subtitles. You kind of have to either watch or not, because
yeah,
you can't do other things, because you really, unless it's a lot of action, you can get lost. So that's one good thing about subtitles, I found.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so let's now hear, what are some examples of when you have listened well?
That's a harder question.
I think for me, it was when I'm really present and I'm fine and I'm listening with all my senses and I'm cueing into just as much that's not being said. that I can, when I'm really listening, it's almost like I'm hearing what they're not saying. I got those words coming at me, like I can hear them. But I have to be really cued in to do that. I can't be distracted or thinking of responses or thinking what clever coaching technique I'm gonna use or question I'm gonna ask. It really has to be just sitting there being just willing to listen with everything and not needing to not being anxious about coming to a conclusion. Am I gonna get this? Are they gonna feel like they got value or gonna get to a solution? But just really being there with them. And sometimes like having to be in an uncomfortable situation where it's painful. But just that's where I feel like that's my best listening. If I'm at my best, that's when it's really great.
Thank you.
I would
Not
say
all the
taking
time.
notes helps me to listen.
Mm.
You know, if I'm really visual, so to write something down that helps me listen and remember, I feel like.
Mhm.
I know for me, I have to remove a lot of distractions.
Mhm.
I remember when I first started my practice, actually when I got my home office finally set up, and I would imagine the letters TLLM on the wall behind where my client was sitting, which stands for talk less, listen more,
Mhm.
as a way to bring it back to, yes, I have good information to convey, but it's only going to be valuable if it's on point to where they are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah, yep.
Do you want me to give the 60-second warning here?
Let's go another minute or so.
Okay.
See, was there something else here in the chat? Okay, there we go. So Sandy, hopefully you're thinking about some times when you've listened well. And part of why I wanted folks to do this, and I'll share this in the larger group, is that confidence is built on evidence. And if we only are looking at the evidence of listening poorly, we'll continue to listen poorly. But if we can remember that, oh, wait a second, I actually have a lot of examples of when I have listened well. I have paid attention. I've been present. Lisa, I'm going to guess that in spite of having the 3 kids and all the craziness of it, there's been times when you've been able to really just get down at your kids' level and just focus.
Sure.
Really hear them. And deep listening doesn't have to take a long time. It can happen quickly. Oh, that's interesting, Sandy. Okay, that makes sense. That you want to be, when you're the one running the show, it makes it easier.
Sure.
Want to be there. Okay, go ahead and set the 60 seconds. Bob, thanks for joining us. We're going to start bringing folks back into the room. And Lauren, Sandy, and Lisa, I appreciate your sharing. It was really helpful. I think we all learned a little more about ways in which we can be better listeners.
For sure. All right, you got about 24 seconds.
I'm going to hold off on any more conversation until the group comes back.
Sure.
You can chat with him.
All right, we're back.
Right. Welcome back, folks. Thank you for doing that little breakout session. I appreciate that. And I recognize it can be a little uncomfortable sharing what may be some embarrassing things with someone you've never met before. But I'm really curious. I would love to hear people's examples, times that they have listened poorly.
Anyone want to share?
Bob? No? Okay,
Oh.
I see. Oh, that's not your hand, it's my cursor. Sorry about that.
Lay, go ahead.
Sure, it just happened last night, returned from a flight to visit family, and my husband says, "Remember I told you that your niece is coming to drop some things off in our garage?" I says, "Absolutely don't remember it at all. We did not have that conversation." He was adamant, he had it with me, and says maybe I had too many cocktails that night that he told me. I called BS and think he meant to tell me, and in his head he told me, but there was no verbal admission of what he claims. But I took it for the team and said, okay, I didn't listen well.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. And I love that you use the phrase that was BS, because that's a phrase that I use in my coaching, but BS stands for something different. It stands for what you said it stands for, but it also stands for our basic story.
Oh, I like it.
Each of us has a basic story around how we listen, how we do life, how we navigate all the different circumstances that are going on. And when we are on autopilot, usually our basic story is running the show. And so deep listening is about interrupting that basic story so that you can really hear what is being said. And Lauren shared some really interesting insights about being able to listen in a different way that allowed her to tune out what may have been thinking she wanted to say in response to actually hear what the other person was saying and really stay present. All right, so now I would like to hear examples of how you have listened well.
Kathy, so I had a great conversation with George. I'm a former journalist, turned grant writer now, but as a journalist, we're actually taught almost to listen intently, ready for questions that what you say. So I normally am a very good listener so that I can understand where they're coming from and have follow-up questions. So I like taking notes.
Okay.
That's why I said visually, I like taking notes.
I think notes are a great thing to take because it often allows us to listen in a different way. Whether it's you want to take notes ahead of the conversation or you're taking notes during the conversation. Again, you've got to check in with yourself. And are you using it as a way to distract and not pay attention, or is it really going to help you stay connected? And that ultimately is what this whole conversation is about. Each of us listens differently. And it's vital to discover what are the ways that you listen specifically. What's going to support you in listening better? All right, any other stories on how you've listened well?
I got to speak with Martin and we got a little bit cut off, but he actually taught me something. Well, I had very good advice about how he was able to read, starting paying more attention to people's emotions as what they're saying, but also reading their body language to help translate if they're really excited about what they're saying or they're just saying it to appease, or to just say okay. So that was pretty cool.
Thank you. That's actually really important because we all take in different ways. And some people, they have you probably heard of face blindness. They don't recognize people's faces. That may also be that they're not able to recognize someone's emotions. But it sounds like with Martin, he was able to recognize someone's emotions and connect with that. What I hope ultimately happens through this webinar is that each of you has a better connection with the ways that you individually listen well. That you're able to tweak it. Now, how do you tweak things like that? So, for example, since I am so auditorily motivated, I love the exec lunches that happen on Wednesdays here in Seattle. It's just vibrant, there's so much energy, but because I'm an extrovert, I oftentimes have a really hard time focusing on the person right in front of me because I'm just looking around to see who else is in the room and who might also be there. That doesn't make me a very good listener. So there's times when I really want to have a conversation, I want to hear better what the person is saying. I'll say, hey, can we move over here? It's quieter. It's not as loud. Be willing to ask for what works for you. Now, sometimes deep listening means it's an email exchange because someone might not be able to hear when you're verbally speaking, but it can be better in writing. So there's lots of different ways that deep listening occurs. Now, it also has to do with so many other factors as well. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Because sometimes an introvert can hear things more effectively because they're able to focus on the one person in front of them. Sometimes an extrovert, like myself, it can be really challenging unless I narrow the field and have only one person or a small group in front of me so I can just listen to those people. But if it's a lot of stuff going on, it can be hard to track the conversation. All right, so any other insights that are popping up right now as we're talking? All right, so another phrase that I want to put out to folks is something that I've used in my coaching, really, I think forever. Confidence is built on evidence. And part of why I had you do the breakout session of looking at where have you done it poorly and where have you done it well, is we want to build confidence in the areas where you are doing it well. It's really easy to find evidence of doing things badly and then reinforcing that and staying with that and then having the internal conversation, oh, I'm not very good at that. I'm not a good listener. I'm not X. Because we keep seeking the evidence of not being good at that thing. But what if you start to look for the evidence of where you have listened well? Of the time when you were able to just stop everything and be with your toddler and just really connect with what they're saying, or with your significant other, or you've got a client, someone's called in and you can just immediately sense that they're stressed. And you're able to just set aside everything else and listen and then communicate back. So I really encourage you to look for evidence of where you have listened well, because then you can build on that. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about, and I'm only going to skim over this because we're not doing, this workshop isn't on that, but I work with a couple of different tools. One is a motivational assessment, which is really valuable for understanding how someone is internally wired. And another tool I work with is called the Enneagram. And I'm guessing some of you have probably heard of it, maybe not. But what I love about this particular resource is it gives me great insight into how someone's point of view influences how they navigate the world. It gives them insight into how they navigate the world. And I'm going to guess all of you at some point in your life, you have done, whether it's a Myers-Briggs or a StrengthsFinder or some kind of assessment that's given you information about yourself. Go back to those assessments. Remind yourself of what are your strengths? How do you use those strengths as a way to help you become a better listener? Because distractions are going to happen all the time. I mean, I'm just thinking about this Zoom. I've got my Zoom picture set for 49 people. And so I've got everyone on screen. And then as soon as someone starts talking, they move around on the screen. So it's like, okay, where am I looking? Who am I paying attention to? That's just one example that we've all had to learn how to deal with in these last 4 years. But there's always going to be distraction. So that leads to, what is your intention? What is your reason for listening right now? Lisa was sharing about having 3 kids and having to juggle all these different things and all the different, getting text messages from one and having to do the breakout room, and we're juggling all the time. And sometimes having shallow listening is just fine because you're in task mode. We cannot deep listen 100% of the time. I wouldn't even try. You'll just wear yourself out. And then when it really is time for you to listen, it can be hard because you've worn yourself out. So it's important to really assess, where's your attention needed? And sometimes you've got someone coming in and they just want to yammer. There's times that I've got a good girlfriend, then she just needs to talk. She just needs to have some know that I'm listening. I don't have to listen deeply, but she processes verbally. That's great. Other times I know that no, really need to stop. So I'd love to hear from folks. What are examples in your life, in your particular circumstances, where you know, okay, this is when I need to put aside everything and focus?
Personally, I try to give my kids my undivided attention right when they get home from school, even if it's just for 5 minutes, but I want them to know that I hear them, I see them. I want to hear what was good in their day, what they need from me. And then it's like, okay, you good? Have a snack. I'm going to go back to work.
Hey, thank you. Great example.
I have one. I can say that it is, I'll be in task mode, but then as soon as somebody starts talking about like planning dates or schedules, I immediately stop what I'm doing and listen. Because there have been times where I totally forget that I made plans with somebody or made plans with something because I was so busy with what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I'll remember that once I'm done with my task, and I don't remember it. So anytime it comes to scheduling, I stop whatever I'm doing and make that schedule and then go back to whatever task I'm at.
Thank you. That's a great example, because what that points to is, if you don't remember the date or the event that you've just said, oh yeah, I'll remember that, then it leads to other challenges in the relationship. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, they don't feel honored or seen because you completely forgot the event. So that's actually a really great insight. Thank you. And I saw some really interesting texts come in. So on the calendar, it doesn't happen. When I really don't want to do something. Okay, that's interesting. Amanda, say more about that.
Okay, for the record, I hate cleaning. I really do. So like when something has to get cleaned, it's like, all right, fine, you let it go long enough. Just focus, get it done, swallow the pill, get it over with, and you're good.
Okay,
But yeah,
thank you.
I don't want to get, if I don't want to do it, it didn't get done unless I focus on it.
Okay. All right, then my wife, when she's going through a difficult time. That's fabulous. That's a really important time. It's sometimes you have to listen during the commercials and sometimes you don't. Performance appraisals where there are issues. Absolutely. When you're having an important conversation with somebody and you really need to make sure that you're present with them. I was reminded of when Lisa said that when her kids get home, it's not quite the same thing, but as soon as I walk in my home, I call out to my 2 cats and I just love them up the moment I walk in. And they've just come to expect that. And there's that something about being present. And it just washes away the day, but I'm listening to them. I'm really connecting with them. And that's ultimately what deep listening is about. Thank you, Lee. I make sure I've covered all the different things. Oh, one of the last things I want to talk about is to have effective listening. Okay, from Sandy. If I'm the only one hearing the message and I need to report back to others, so you're the conduit. So you need to make sure that you really are hearing what's going on. So one of the things that can get in the way of effective listening is your headspace. It could be that whoever was it that said that you want to listen when your wife's having a hard time. You want to be there for her, but what if your head is not in that space? What if you're still focused on something else that's going on? What if you're having a hard time bringing yourself back to the present moment? What I recommend in that situation is to name that. Tell your truth. Work from a place of reality. Sweetheart, I love you, and I know that this is important to you. I am not present right now. Can we come back to this conversation in a half an hour when I can wrap this thing up and I can clear my head? Or I just need 5 minutes. That's actually an incredibly honoring way to deal with a situation where you want to be present, but you need to finish up on this thing. You know that you're not going to be able to stay present unless you're able to set aside this other thing. Then what happens when someone is talking to you about something where you have a very strong position or belief? Sometimes what happens is we start moving into, I'm just listening to respond, so will you please stop talking so I can tell you the right way? It can be really challenging to say, okay, wait a second. This person is important to me. And I want to be curious. I want to actually hear what they have to say. And recognizing I may not agree with it. But what if this is an opportunity to have a deeper connection, even if we don't agree? And that requires tremendous curiosity to put aside what you believe because the relationship is more important. That's one of the hardest things to do. And we live in a deeply polarized time right now. So the more curious you can be and really have an understanding of why am I wanting to listen? Why do I want to have a connection with this person? You may never come to the same page in terms of what you believe or value, but maybe you come to greater understanding. You're able to really have a sense of, okay, I don't agree, but now I understand why they believe that way. And one of the last things to mention is maybe you've got an agenda. Maybe you've set up a time for a conversation and you want to get something across. You want to communicate something. If you've got an agenda, share it. Tell the other person that. Be transparent. And I think sometimes that's one of the hardest things also is to be vulnerable. So it's really important that we have a conversation about this. And I'm still angry about X, Y, and Z. Or I'm disappointed at how this project was handled. Be transparent. And I think the more willing you are as one person in the communication to come forward and say, you know what, this is hard for me, or this is challenging, or I need time to figure this out. And you're doing it not as an attack, but as a way to stay open. That automatically creates more openness for other people. All right, so again, I'm going to turn it back to all of you. Any thoughts or comments? There's a lot of content that we've been covering. Okay.
Go ahead, Dale.
I was going to say that you reinforced a lot of good things here and gave a lot of great advice. And on the call here, there are two people that are excellent at listening. And I kept going back to thinking how they do it and why they do it and their intention. And so just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dale. All right, where are we at here? There was, all right. But we've got just a few more minutes before the hour is up. And any last thing people want to share before we wrap this up?
I, oh,
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, Martin and I had a little talk about this earlier, but I grew up with learning disabilities, ADD, dyslexia, scotopic sensitivity, and all this stuff. So Audible is very important for me to be able to listen. And so I know that it's very important when clients call, even we spend more time on emails than phones. And I know I miss a lot in email because I've overread or I miss something. So I just try to work on that more frequently. And I know I have to read emails 2 or 3 times to really understand it. And otherwise I will totally miss something. But I am a total Audible learner, 100%. And so, and I know that because of my ADD, I get distracted very easy, like you were saying, oh, what's happening over here? Squirrel. So, and it's hard for me not to, it's like whenever you try to do the example of bad listening, I was like, man, I know I have and I know it's out there, but it's hard for me to understand or recognize that sometimes unless because, I'll totally not hear something or forget it. Well, I didn't hear it. So I forgot it. So I forgot I did bad listening for that. So I guess it's important to hear for me is like the biggest way I learn things is by audible and then hands-on. So I have to realize that when he was mentioning seeing body language, I don't see that a lot of the times. So I really have to start working on understanding that and putting it towards my listening skills.
Thank you. So I so appreciate the folks who have shared because you've brought in some really interesting points. And so Levi, for you, it's going to be really important that you ask for the conversation, that you ask for what you need. Advocate for yourself to become a better listener. Understand what you need and the ways that work best for you. It may not match with the other person, but then you can find an in-between way of making it work. But it really comes down to the why. And usually when we're doing deep listening, it's because we want to connect with the other person. We want to genuinely understand where they're coming from. And that can sometimes require a negotiation of, well, I need it in writing, but I need it verbally. How do you maneuver between that? So we are just about at time. I would welcome any conversation folks want to have. Please reach out. I don't know, Lisa, can you put my contact information in the chat? And I'll just tell you, it's real easy. My email is Kathy@kathyclayton.com. So if you've got any questions or things you want to share, please reach out. I would love to continue this conversation. And thank you so much, Lisa and IEA, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kathy. This was great. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, it'll be available on our YouTube channel, which you can find on the IEA homepage in just a couple of days.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks,
Yes,
everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.